If you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Those words from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As tomorrow we celebrate the federal holiday in his honor. He was a reverend, a civil rights leader, a husband, and a father. Dr. King would be 97 years old today. And I am joined by Dr. King's son, Martin Luther King III, along with his wife, Arndrea Waters King. Together, they lead the Drum Major Institute, an organization founded to carry on Dr. King's legacy. Martin and Arndrea, thank you so much for joining us today. We absolutely appreciate it. Martin, I have to ask you, when you look at the current state of this country, even the stories you were hearing leading up to this, what do you think that your father would say?
Well, I think, number one, had my father lived, we would be in a different place than we are in our nation today. But one of the quotes that comes to mind is, how do we hew out of a mountain of despair a stone of hope? How do we bring the nation together? We are operating, it feels like, at least from the leadership perspective, not in the most civil fashion. We have lost the decorum of civility. Civility must be brought back to the landscape. It doesn't mean we will agree on every issue. We're not a monolithic group of people. We come from all kind of different backgrounds. But Dad's message perhaps is even more prevalent today than it was even probably a little bit after his lifetime, because of the divisions. And we are much better as a nation than the behavior that is being exhibited. And I think that that part of our job is to challenge us to embrace. It's not just nonviolence. That's a critical part of what we believe. But it really is, how do we become the best of the United States of America to provide leadership around the world? We're not exhibiting that at this point at all.
It's so interesting that you started that saying, had your father lived. A very important point to make. Martin, right now, the future of the Voting Rights Act is in the hands of the Supreme Court. They'll specifically look at Section 2, which prohibits discriminatory voting practices on the basis of race, and they'll decide whether that's constitutional. Your father said a voteless people is a powerless people. What is your take on this?
Well, this is such a critical has been a critical piece of legislation. It is very unfortunate that the court appears to be poised to decimate it. And when you look at the bedrock of what was one of the most important initiatives that Dad and his team and many others worked for, was the Voting Rights Act. And the fact that John Lewis himself was able to write a piece of legislation that would make voting fair and just for all, and yet the United States Congress chooses not to pass that legislation. We are in dire straits at this moment. I hope that the Supreme Court is looking at it in a different way than what we've seen reported. And I think that we're going to have to keep up just the momentum of saying how precious this right is, particularly when we're getting ready to observe the 250th anniversary of this nation and its history. And yet it feels like that portion is trying to go backward. We're not where we need to be. But what I know is Dad and his team, Mom and her team, showed us that it only takes a few good human beings to bring about change.
And I know that you were interviewed for a really great piece that I read in the New York Times this morning, where you said the vote is the most powerful nonviolent tool that citizens have at their disposal. Arndrea, I want to bring you in. Under the Trump administration, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is urging white men to file discrimination claims. Just this week, President Trump said civil rights protections have led to discrimination against white people. What do you think about that?
Well, as someone who spent the early part of her career literally monitoring extreme far-right groups and hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, and skinheads, it's very alarming to see the very things that we were organizing and researching in the 90s actually become sound bites in 2026. And it is particularly alarming to hear the very same type of language coming from the highest office in our land, from the Oval Office. Racism is still racism. Rebranded racism is racism.
And Martin, your father famously won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. This year's winner was Venezuelan opposition leader Marina Machado. She gave her prize to President Trump this week after he repeatedly said he deserved it. What's your reaction to that?
That's a very good question. It is interesting that that was a choice that was made. And, I would like to understand more what that means. I mean, the fact of the matter is a committee chose her. They had an opportunity to choose President Trump. They did not. So it begs the question, what does this mean? And I think we have to be focused on how do we continue to build and create freedom, justice, and equality throughout the world. There's so many issues that are being navigated through, and I don't know if I understand that, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that somehow we got to figure out, how do we come together? How do we create peace in the world? How do we advance democracy? We as a nation are talking about democracy around the world, and sometimes even at home, it feels like we're suppressing democracy. How do you advance democracy and yet talking about dismantling the Voting Rights Act in the United States? So there are a lot of contradictions. Here's what I'll finally say. What we have established is we are a nation that is consistently inconsistent.
It's fascinating that you point that out, because when we talk about the Voting Rights Act, again, in that New York Times article, it's pointed out that back in 1965, a poll found that 95% of Americans approved it, were in favor of it. So the idea that it is being reviewed by the Supreme Court and could be undone certainly does speak to a potential change. I want to ask you both, as we prepare to observe MLK Day tomorrow, what is your message to the country, to our fellow Americans? Arndrea, I'll start with you.
I would remind us all that justice requires endurance, that love requires endurance, that this is a time that none of us can no longer be neutral as it relates to the type of world in which we want to see for ourselves and our children. And we literally are at a battle for the soul of this nation. And each one of us have to decide, are we feeding the wolf of more division, more anger, more hatred? Or are we going to feed the wolf of Martin and Coretta Scott King, of peace, love, and justice? The beloved community is not merely a utopian dream. It can and will be a reality for each and every one of us, but it is for all of us to do our part in helping to bend that arc towards freedom, justice, and equality, the very things that, as we're looking at the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country, that are on paper. Now it's up to each one of us to live up to those ideas.
And I would say, two or three things that my father said. Look, violence won't stomp out violence. Only love and nonviolence will. So we can continue to go down the road of violence, and Dad would say we must learn nonviolence, or we might face non-existence. He would also say that darkness will never put out darkness. Only light can do that. We've got to find a way to bring more light into our lives, into our nation, into our world, infuse that. And that's what Dad and Mom, part of what they were about, infusing light, to build community, to build the beloved community. That is something that can become real, but it's only when we as human beings decide we're going to engage. So I say, finally, don't give up, don't give out, don't give in. Let's find a way to keep moving forward to ultimately realize the dream.
Yes, another one of the quotes from your father: our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. Martin Luther King III, Arndrea Waters King, thank you both so much for being with us today. We absolutely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.